Dr. Yahki, welcome back.
Yes,
I
sir.
never knew TV, right? Before we start, I have to say that after our first reason, you really inspired me to step up my fruits
Yeah,
and my health. So we give thanks. And as brothers, I have to give you that public praise, saying that I'm extremely proud of you
I
and
appreciate it.
impressed with what you did, really manifesting your vision and putting your money where your mouth is.
Appreciate it.
People can't see the magnitude of what you have here, but they will see it
Yeah,
in the
eventually
future, right?
see it. But yeah, we sitting in the wealth of knowledge and the wealth of healthy situations, ain't we?
With 100 herbs and roots behind them, literally, no
Yeah,
exaggeration. All right,
yeah,
all right, cool, man. I've read numerous creation stories, right? Whether it's the dreaming Aboriginal creation story, Egyptian creation story with Ra Nu Shoot, American Hopi origin story, or the Dogon creation story by Amma. The one that makes the most sense to me is the Anunnaki, right?
mm-hmm.
Um, in the Anunnaki theory of the origins of humans being created to be slaves, the violent nature of humans, massive increase in technology, and the character Adamu and the story that has similarities to the name and characteristics of Adam in the Bible. But the first thing I want to talk about, man, is the breakdown they have that human beings were created to be slaves. I
Yeah,
know people don't like hearing it, but when I observe human beings fight on daily life, it just seems like not even the average, but majority of people, they need to be told what to do. They're
yeah,
not really into like fending for
yeah.
themselves.
I mean, when you look at it, biological entities that we call human beings have something called the worship gene. If anybody think I'm lying, just Google the worship gene in human beings. We have a worship gene. So there have been genes that have been unlocked in our systems and certain other genes in DNA that have been suppressed that gives us the worshiping feeling. That's why, Christianity is a very big worshiping type of religion. Every religion, whether you get into the Muslim community, every religion have a very, very worshiping type of entity that's involved in that interaction. And notice that they, instead of looking in the mirror and seeing that you are comprised of everything that God is truly made of, you look in the sky and you bow down and you live your life guided off these certain rules that was given to you by an entity that you can't even see. And instead you fail to look in the mirror and say, dang, I am a piece of that entity. I'm not saying worship yourself, but I'm gonna think very highly of myself. When I pray, I don't hear another voice. I hear my voice in my subconscious mind in my head. So we were definitely created with a worship gene. When you get into the Anunnaki story, Anu, it's actually a Hebrew word, and what it means, Anunnaki means from the heaven to earth they came. It makes total sense when you look at our genes, when you look at what we comprised of, when you look at different blood types, A, O positive, A negative, something marked not only our blood, but something marked our genetics. And I think Elohim, when you get into Elohim, that's my last name, Yahki Elohim. Elohim just means Anunnaki. It's these group of beings. When God's in the Bible says, God said, let man, let us, plural, it says, and God said, and Elohim said. Elohim is God. And so when you look at the word Elohim, it means God with an S, gods, plural. So many gods created man. It said, let is God, and God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness. So it shows you that mankind is a template and we look like our creator. That's the first thing they said, right? And then once you see that, then it says what they gonna do. I'm gonna give them the dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, whoopty wop and this and that. But notice the instruction came. He created Adam and Eve. He put Adam and Eve, Elohim did. So Elohim, these gods created man, this biological man. They put this man in a garden, right? So they put man in a garden, and then it says his whole purpose was to dress and keep the garden. So his whole purpose was for servitude in the first place. He was supposed to dress and keep this little simulation that the creator Elohim put him in. Then it said that he got smart and he disobeyed Elohim, right? And when he got smart and disobeyed Elohim, he left one service place where it didn't seem like he was working, but to dress and keep the garden is still servitude. He had to guard the garden. What was he guarding the garden for? And he had to dress it, meaning he had to build it up and make it fashionable for him and his family. But after Adam and Kawar, who they call Adam and Eve, went against Elohim's plan and instructions, he kicked them out of one simulation and then he put them in a more hostile environment. Now, in this hostile environment, guess what it says? It says that they had to work from the sweat of thy what? Brow. So now they went from this, tilling the garden to this rigorous hard work. Then you start looking around in the book of Genesis, it's talked about how they worked in a place where there was gold, Havilah, where there was gold.
Back to the gold
It
mining.
talks about that they gold mine. It talks about how they was working in the middle of 4 rivers, which where the garden was at. They kicked them out of the garden and put something called a Melachine or archangel in to keep them from getting back into paradise. And while they was outside of paradise, they literally had to work from the sweat of their brow. And if you read in the book of Enoch, or you read in the book of Jasher, or you read in the book of Adam and Eve, it shows how rigorous that work was. So when you even think about the creation of man and what was the whole point intended from them, even in a Bible aspect, Adam was created to work.
But you know, there's a
And I'm just speaking about the Bible. We're not even talking about the Sumerian tablets. We're not even getting into the Kemetic tablets. We're not getting into the Emerald tablets. Man was created for servitude.
there's one part I want to talk about before we jump to the next second part of this question. You would know this better than me. There's a verse in the Bible where Adam says he doesn't want to go out there with them, and it's kind of like a contradiction in a sense, because if that's the first man, who's the other people he doesn't want to?
I mean, even with Cain and Abel, you know, when Cain killed Abel,
it's Cain that said that.
yeah,
Right? Yeah,
Cain killed Abel, and you know, he basically he put a mark on Cain, and he put Cain outwardly in basically the world, and he put a mark on Cain, and he told everybody else not to kill him. So if it's only Cain and his family and all of this, then who was supposed to be killing Cain? So yeah, I mean, it's so many different, when you start reading the Bible, and I'm speaking from a person that basically, you can call me a biblical scholar. I read and write fluent Hebrew. I taught a community. I had my own temple, and me and my big brother Malachi Maccabee taught the Bible. I was teaching it personally. I taught it for 13 years before I left the Hebrew community that I was in. Never said I left the ideology, never said I left even some of the practices of the Bible, but you notice inconsistencies, names changes, same people, different ages change. It's 2 creation stories from Genesis 1 and 2. One that says we all come from the water, then another one that says some things came from the earth. So, I mean, if you read it, you just have to remember, when man writes something, it's not going to always be 100% correct, because man is going to be involved in their ego. It's going to be different types of programming. It's different languages comprises when you read the Bible. For instance, in one chapter, it will say El Elyon. In the next chapter, it will say Edonai. In one chapter, it will call him El. The next chapter, it will call it Yahweh or Yahweh. So, I mean, anybody know, if you just do a little bit of research and read it slow and read it in its original language, which is Hebrew and Aramaic to Greek, I mean, you will see the inconsistencies. Now, I'm not knocking it for what it's doing, though, because it is taking you from your animalistic nature and it is reinventing you to become a newer being, high elevating into Christ consciousness, or the key to chakra, which means it's taking you from your flesh and it's making you involve your flesh and connect it back to your spirit in a more advanced way to look at reality, for you can love yourself and love your brother as you love thyself. So when you look at it in that standpoint, I love it. Even when you get into the book of Genesis, or in Hebrew we call it Bereshith, chapter 1, verse 29, it talks about our original diet before sin actually happened in the garden, and Adam and Hawa was kicked out of the garden. It shows you what we ate. It says that we were supposed to eat fruit bearing seed after its kind. We were supposed to eat the herbs. The herbs were supposed to be for the healing of the nations, and we were supposed to eat fruit bearing seed after its kind, and we were supposed to drink the water. So if in the beginning nothing died, we are supposed to live eternity in the flesh and in the spirit. Now we only live eternity in the spiritual aspect, and we got to take on new forms of flesh to keep this thing going. Now this flesh died. Back then they was living to be 999 years old, but through sin and corruption and technology and messing up our pollutants and our oxygens and the oxygen in the environment, now we went from 120 years to only making it to 66 years old, speaking of black men in America. So even when you look at it in that sense, nothing died back then. So if nothing died and everything was supposed to live for eternity in this paradise that we call the Garden of Eden, notice what their original diet was. It was fruits, vegetables, melons, and herbs to heal. Nothing died, so you wasn't eating meat. Then in fact, when you get to the book of Revelation, chapter 21, when it talks about how Elohim descends its spaceship from the earth, they call it the cube or the Merkabah. And it talks about Christ coming back, the Christ consciousness coming back, and Jerusalem descends from the heavens, the Hashemayim. It descends from the heavens. It reminds me of a spaceship returning, or Nebaru returning back to earth. But notice what it said when Nebaru returned back to earth. It said that we was going to get superhuman like powers, going to get our powers back. It talks about 144,000 being mighty and having the genetic code to be able to jump and fly over mountains. But it always go back to the diet too. It said it was going to go back to a tree, and these trees bear 7 different manners of fruit every week or every month or something like that. And when they eat these fruits and eat these leaves, it's going to be for the what? The healing of the people. It's going to take away their pain. And this is just a beautiful thing in the Bible. Whenever it talks about meat, it just seemed gruesome. It seemed sinful. But whenever it talks about vegetable fruits and herbs, it seemed like salvation is something that's freeing yourself and freeing your soul. And these are facts. So even if we believe in an ideology that Christ is going to return, which I think is the Christ consciousness returning, I think is the Nebaru returning, bringing this planet back into the gravitational pull of this earth, which according to what I've been seeing is already here, because we've been seeing multiple suns. I know that some of these suns are sun simulators. These are fake suns, but it's another one. It's another one that's looking real promising. But I think that's Nebaru coming back, which is the second Christ, or the return of the Christ consciousness. And now you see more people going into veganism, realizing that veganism is full of crock. Now they switching over more into the beginning diet, or what I'll call the Edemic or the Edom diet, the paradise diet, which is fruits, berries, melons, vegetables, and herbs when you're sick.